The total of the current assets is rupees 40,000. Because of this certain amount of assets are given and all the assets total is 40,000. Now making the total of the current liabilities, it comes to around 28,000 rupees. Creditors, bank overdraft, as well as the taxation for current and future, the total amount of the current liabilities comes to 28,000. Now see the comparison of that. 40,000 it's your current assets, 28,000 rupees it's your current liability. Now this ratio would be find out in proportion. Here it is not to be find out in percentage, and that's why when you find out in proportion, base is always assumed 1. So whenever you find out the proportion, the base is always comes 1, and then you try to find out the comparison of this. So now when you compare this 40,000 and 28,000, according to the answer, that comes to 1.43 is to 1. 1.43 is to 1, it shows that the company have current assets 1.43 times than the current liability. It means the company have enough amount of current assets to meet current liabilities at the time of maturity, but it is not a satisfactory. It's because of here the standard ratio is given. When whichever the industries are there, the standard current ratio is 2:1. Standard current ratio is 2:1. But this is also sometimes affected. So don't consider the standard ratio is 2:1. Just consider that on the basis of that industry, whether the company have enough amount of liquidity or immediate liquidity in their hands to meet all the liabilities at the time of their requirements. So here this is a current ratio. Now see, the next ratio is quick ratio. Next is quick ratio. And the formula of the quick ratio is quick assets divided by quick liabilities. Now what is the formula of quick assets? The quick assets formula is current assets minus stock. It means that the stock would be removed from the current assets, and that is your quick assets. So except stock, all are considered under the quick assets. And in the quick liabilities, bank overdraft removed from the current liability. So that means the bank overdraft would not be considered at the time of a quick liability and deducted from the total liability, total current liability, that is your quick liability. Even here in this case, provision for taxation for future is also to be deducted from the current liability. PFT future is also not considered a quick liability. So in this regard, what would be your quick assets after stock would be removed from the current assets? According to the calculation, quick assets is around 28,000 rupees. Quick assets is around 28,000 rupees. And when you make a total of quick liabilities after not considering two items, bank overdraft and provision for taxation future, it comes to around 20,000 rupees. Now we are going to compare these two items, 28,000 divided by 20,000. As I already mentioned here, when you find out the proportion, the base, the denominator is always considered as a base, and numerator and denominator comparisons to be found out. So the denominator would be divided to the numerator, then answer would be, it's coming 1.40 is to 1. 1.40 is to 1. So the base is always denominator 1, and then division of this 2, that 1.40. So the answer is 1.40 is to 1. Standard ratio here, quick ratio is 1 is to 1. But again, as I mentioned here, the standard would not be considered and standard not to be taken. Why? Because of industry to industry, company to company, it's always changed. What type of parameters, what are the factors to be affected to the company, that is not remain same for all the company, and that's why the ratio, standard ratio, may not be considered for all the companies at the same time. Here the company have enough amount of quick assets to meet the quick liabilities. That is a satisfactory for this company. Moving to the next ratio, and that is a debt equity ratio. So in case of a debt equity ratio, we need to identify the long term debts compare with the equity or shareholders fund. So long-term liability divided by shareholders fund, that is your debt equity ratio. Now here long-term liabilities is considered, which are the liabilities? One is debenture, it's a long-term liability. And if you have a bank loan or a financial institution loan, this is also a long-term liability. In case of a shareholders fund, equity share, preference share, reserves and surplus, these are the part of shareholders fund. But when you find out the shareholders fund, if you have a fictitious assets, actually which are not an assets, that means fictitious assets are always deducted from the balance of this or the total of this, and that is your shareholders fund, and this fund would be compared with the whichever the items you required and needed. So see the question, and according to the question just identify, do you have a debentures and long-term loans or not. From these comparisons and from the information of the question, we identified we have a long-term liabilities around 32,000 rupees. We have 32,000 rupees of a long-term liabilities, and when you compare all the shareholders fund, approximately we find out the shareholders fund is around 60,000 rupees. The shareholders fund is around 60,000 rupees, that is what we find out. So after all the calculation of this, all right, so now the comparison of this, as I already mentioned here, the base is always 1, that means your denominator is considered as 1. And now the division between these two, see the answer, that answer it comes to around 0.53. 0.53. It means your debt equity ratio shows the amount of liability is almost half than your total amount of capital investments, proprietors investments, owners investments. It means that the company have enough amount of fund, ownership fund, to meet all the third party liability or long-term liabilities. Now moving to the next ratio, and that is also related to a proprietary, that is related to the balance sheet ratio, and it is a proprietary ratio. The proprietary ratio is all about the comparison of shareholders fund divided by total assets. Proprietary fund ratio or a proprietary ratio is a comparison of two variables, and by that is total assets and shareholders fund. Why this ratio is found out? The company wanted to know that how much amount of shareholders fund has been invested in the total assets. That means what is the contribution by the owners in the total amount of assets, in the investments of assets. That's why this ratio has to be determined. Shareholders funds formula is remain same what was actually considered at the time of debt equity ratio, or in whichever the ratio, the shareholders funds formula is remains same only. In every time wherever the shareholders fund is written, the formula is remain same. Total assets, just be careful, as we deducted fictitious assets from the shareholders fund, the same way if the fictitious assets are given in the balance sheet, when you taking the total assets, fictitious assets remove from it. Fictitious assets never consider under this total. So just check it out the question. If you have the amount of fictitious assets in the question, I just want to tell you that the two fictitious assets would not be considered in the question. Here it is not given. In this question, you don't have a fictitious assets. So here, when you are going to compare this, the shareholders fund is already find out here, that is 60,000 rupees. Now we need to find out the total assets, and that the total asset is given almost 1,20,000 rupees. Total asset is given 1,20,000. If you want to find out in percentage, you can find out this in percentage also, but the proportion is also enough. As I told you, the denominator is always considered a 1, that's base is your 1, and now your division, the division comes to 0.50. It shows very clear that your shareholders fund investment in total asset is almost 0.50, that means half. The amount of shareholders fund invested in the total asset is almost 50%. So that's why I told you, if you want to find out in percentage, it is also very much enough and very much comfortable to determine this ratio in percentage also. So here this proprietary ratio and the other ratio along with the proprietary, all these ratios are showing the position of the company on the particular date, and that reflects a balance sheet ratio. Balance sheet ratio would be helpful to evaluate your balance sheet position on a specific date, and from that evaluations you can identify your future plan. Now for the ratio analysis, third problem we are going to discuss, and then the third problem we are going to discuss the issue related to the composite ratio. Composite ratio, as we discussed in the theory, that is the ratio has been covered the information of whole financial statement, that means revenue statement as well as the balance sheet statement. But the informations which we are going to compare, sometimes in the ratio, one information has been taken from revenue account and another variable has been taken from the balance sheet. So that means some ratios that we are going to compare, that the informations may be taken from both the statements, and that comparison has been reflected certain things. So here we have a third problems in your segment where I was actually mentioned you. I think so the question is in front of you, that the question is the details of Srinath company are as under, and besides the details mentioned, the some informations given, and on the basis of that informations we are going to discuss a few ratios. So on the basis of this ratio, I just want to tell you first, there are few informations in front of you, that the one is balance sheet is given. After the balance sheet, they were actually given the financial statement informations, and after that financial statement information, that the revenue statement informations, and the some adjustments and the other things are given, with very few adjustments, like what is your opening stock, how many days to be considered, these things would be also given in this particular information. So all these informations would be helpful for the calculation of this ratio. Now let's take one by one all the ratios. I think so I covered almost all the type of ratios under this problem. Try to cover almost all the type of ratios for your reference and for your understanding. Let's begin with the first ratio, and that is a gross profit ratio. Again it comes, so I think so it is nothing new for you. So the gross profit ratios, as you know, the formula is gross profit divided by sales into 100. So this ratio is find out in percentage. Now you just refer your statement, revenue statement, which was given after the balance sheet, and from the revenue statement you can identify two informations very clearly. The one is gross profit, that is given 7,50,000, and the sales according to my knowledge it is 15 lakh rupees. So 15 lakh rupees sales divided by the concerned items, and if you compare this, you would be find out the answer is around 50%. That means it shows that your gross profitability in this particular problem, in this particular case, is 50%. The amount of gross profit has actually contributed 50% of the total sales. Now moving to the next ratio is the stock turnover ratio. Now see, the stock turnover ratio's formula is cost of goods sold divided by average stock. So cost of goods sold you can find out, as I already mentioned earlier, the cost of goods sold you can find out with the opening stock plus purchases, purchase expense minus closing stock. But here in this case, you don't have all this information because of the trading account is not given. But instead of this, I was mentioned another formula also to find out the cost of goods sold, that is sales minus gross profit. We have a sales that is 15 lakh minus gross profit is 7.5 lakh, 7,50,000. So in that sense, your cost of goods sold is 7,50,000. Now you see the average stock. Opening stock is not given in the revenue statement, in the statements, but it is given in after the balance sheet in adjustments. What was the opening stock? Closing stock you can take it from the balance sheet. See the balance sheet asset side, you will find out the closing stock. So average stock you can find out with the total of opening stock and closing stock. The sources I already told you, which you can easily identify, and then the divided by 2, opening plus closing divided by 2. So your average stock, it comes to 2,50,000 according to my knowledge. Just check it out whether it is right or wrong. So in that case, your average stock and cost of goods sold, both the variables which are actually required to identify your stock turnover ratio, is now in your hand. So now comparison of the cost of goods sold, that is 7,50,000, divided by average stock, that is 2,50,000, that the answer is 3 times. It means, where we were already analyzed earlier also, the stock turnover ratio reflects the how many times your stock has been rotated in the business in a year. Here you can say that your total stock has been rotated in the business 3 times in a year. So this is actually shows your efficiency, your capacity efficiency in the business. Moving to the next ratio, and that is operating profit ratio. Operating profit ratio, I think so it is also comes once again, so I don't think so there would be any question to find out the operating profit ratio. All of you are very much aware about the formula of operating profit ratio. Operating profit divided by sales into 100. But the question is how to find out the operating profit, and that is sales minus cost of goods sold plus operating expense. So here sales is already having, that is 15 lakh. Cost of goods sold also in your hand, that is 7,50,000. And then operating expense. For that you need to see your revenue statement. Please check it out, your revenue statement. Under the revenue statement, after the cost of goods sold deducted and gross profit is find out, from the gross profit there are 2 information. One is admin expenses and the second one is selling and distribution expenses. In admin expenses there is one information in the bracket that interest on debenture is also included. Now included interest on debentures of this admin expense is given 1,25,000. That means under this operating expenses, financial expenses cannot be considered. So we need to remove that interest on debentures because of it's a financial expense from that admin expenses. How you can remove it? Yeah, just check it out, the balance sheet. Balance sheet liability side, the debentures value is given and that is 10 lakh rupees. What is the rate of interest on debenture? That is 10%. So 10 lakhs, 10% rate of interest on debentures is comes to 1 lakh rupees. Now see the admin expenses. Admin expenses are given total 1,25,000. Out of in which the 1 lakh rupees is an interest on debenture because of it's a financial expense, could not be considered under this category, and that's why the interest on debenture 1 lakh is removed from the total admin expense. It comes to 25,000. So remaining admin expense except interest on debenture, it's only 25,000. Selling and distribution expenses remains same, 125. So now 15 lakh minus 750 plus 150 comes to 9 lakh rupees, and that's why your operating profit comes to 6 lakh rupees.